G'day folks, welcome to another episode of Learn to Paint TV. Rod Moore from Moore Art School with you again, and today we're going to do a nice little cottage setting in a landscape from a little country town called Sofala. And artists have been going to the Sofala and Hills End region in New South Wales for many years, painting the landscape and cottages around that area. Particular favourite of mine, it's right near Kapiti Valley, which is one of the most beautiful places in Australia. So we're going to do this little cottage here with a road leading up into some distant mountains and some sort of larger trees and things in here. It's from a photo that I took last time I was there. And it's got an interesting little shape of this cottage. And the cottage itself used to actually be owned by a pretty well-known Australian artist as well. I first painted this cottage in a class that I did with Casey Seeley, who's one of Australia's great landscape artists of this generation. And Casey did a workshop, but the painting we did of it was taken from the other end of the street. So I went there and took a whole lot of my own photos, and that's what we're going to do today. So let's get stuck into it. As always with the Moore method of painting, we'll start out with step one, which is doing our drawing, just using a little flat brush. I've got ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson, and we'll just use those to get in a bit of a drawing. And always looking for the big shapes. So, and then we've got mountain range that runs up there. We've got trees that come down past there. This road runs sort of down there, and it runs itself, runs a fair way. I'll run that angle out that way like that, like so. Gets a bit narrow at the top there, so it's probably more like that. Not too fussed with it at this stage because I know I'll adjust that as we go. Then the distant mountain, well, there's some trees that sort of live in the back there. There's a hill line that runs there, and then we've got some distant mountains that run there. That hill line probably is a bit flatter. There's a main tree that sits in around about there somewhere, and then the rest of it is the cottage. And the cottage is obviously, in getting the perspective right, is going to be a little bit larger. So let's just get that right. Cottage is going to sit around about there. It's going to have a wall there. It's going to have the roof line come to there and then out to there, and then it's going to run that way. It runs down to there to a chimney. Now I'm just roughing this out. It's not, you know, I'm not going for a hugely accurate drawing here at this stage. So it comes in through there. Got this fence line that runs through there, and then that comes to about there. That runs through there, and it sticks out at the end a bit there. Something like that. My pad got a little bit thin there, so let me just... So it runs out to there. It's going to sit somewhere in there. We'll get into the more detailed work of it as we progress this painting out. Yeah, as always, we want to get the big shapes in. So if we ignore the cottage for a second, we've got the road as a big shape, got this tree, this clump of trees, that little mountain range in the background, the sky virtually paints itself, and then we've got the cottage, right? So we're simplifying it down to a handful of big shapes, which is what we always want to endeavour to do. So we'll then move on to step two, which in the Moore method of painting is our block-in phase. Move to a bigger brush. We've got big shapes. Our goal here now is just to block in our big shapes with a lot of paint and just get the tone and the overall colour right is what we're really aiming for. Let's take a good healthy chunk of the blue, good healthy chunk of that red, a little touch of the white, not too much, and a little touch of the yellow, and we'll mix those around and see how we go with that tone. And got this little outbuilding there, so I'll just work around that. So I'm going to start off with this main tree here, and I'll just scrub that in. Remember, this is just the underpainting, so I'm not too fussed about painting it neat. I mean, it is a tree. Trees don't grow neat. So just scrub the paint on. Get a general sort of tree shape. Okay. And that looks like a pretty good tree shape to me. It's not a gum tree, this one, as we might often paint. Not even sure what type of tree it is. It looks more like a deciduous-y type tree. But nice random, pushing the brush up like that will give you some nice effects, I think. Okay. Get it into the base here so we can get a bit of shadow happening. It looks like the light is coming from over here. So we won't be running shadow that way, it'll be coming more from the other side of the street there. So that's, you know, that's looking good. Let's get a bit more blue, a bit more red, touch more white into there. Like so. And there's a few different layers of trees in this group here. However, I'm not going to fuss trying to get too many different layers in there. I'm just going to treat it all as one big mass. I don't believe that anyone's going to look at the painting later and go, wow, there should have been 3 or 4 layers of trees in there. As a beginner, that's not something I'd be fussing with too much. Sure, when you get more experience, and describing different layers of trees might be beneficial. Now, there's a small layer of trees at the back, so let's just get that a little bit cooler, so a bit more blue in there. We can't go too cool though at this stage, because we've got those distant mountains, remember? So we'll just lighten it off a little bit. Try that. You can see there's a big difference there. So we've got warmth in here, we're a little bit cooler here. Now these distant trees that we're describing are they're even cooler and lighter again. Okay, take some yellow and some red, mix up a nice earthy colour, get rid of the rest of that yellow. Okay, and I'm just going to scrub this in. The reason why I do this is because it's a nice reddy warm tone. It's a good earth tone to place in any landscape in the foreground sort of ground area. But also when you start to add green grasses over it, or even golden burnt off fields, resonates, because red is the complement of green. The two work really beautifully together. A little bit of that red poking through a green field just brings it alive and makes it really, you know, vibrate with life. Run that in. So yeah, like I'm just piling that paint in there. I'm not fussing about it, and I want you to adopt that attitude, you know, like of just nice big broad brush marks and strokes. It'll give it more life and feeling to it, rather than a really rigid, uptight painting. But you know, painting is one of those funny things that it really reveals your personality to the world, I think, sometimes. So just get that in through there. Okay, welcome back everyone. Well, I've let this dry off and it's all looking good. So now we're moving to step 3 of the More method, which is of course our details, highlights and finishing touches. Now I think what we'll do is we'll put a little bit of colour into the roof and so on of our main cottage and shed here, and the little shed at the back, just to get something happening in there, and then we'll come in and we'll start to detail up the back and work our way forward from there. Okay, so first of all, we've got this red roof here and on this one here. So we'll start off by getting that in, and it's largely alizarin crimson. I think we'll get away with using alizarin crimson mixed in with some white. We'll just check that. A tiny little touch of yellow in there, just so it's not too, a little touch of blue, just so that it's not too cherry red. Okay, and let's just test that. That looks pretty close. I'll just lighten it back just a little. And, you know, again, I'm just going to block this in, so get some colour in, and that'll dry off then when we're working in some of the detail area up in the back there. It's always a good idea to run the brush in the direction that the old corrugated sheet of iron on the roof there would go. So they run down at an angle like that. So if you use the brush in that direction, that'll tell the eye which way paint's going there. It's a little bit rough in the bottom here. Okay. And then it runs out on an angle through there. Run through there. Okay, now again, it's a little bit rough along there, but I will tighten that up as we go. Now in the background here, I'm going to add a little bit more red and, whoop, not that much blue, a little bit more blue and some more white. Shifting the tone a little bit so it's a bit cooler. See, I've got way too much blue in there. It's a little bit cooler in tone there. See that? It's very different. It's probably still a little bit too on the blue side. So I'll add a bit more red back into it. A little bit more white. Let's test that. There we go. So the idea here is it's the same sort of corrugated iron, but we just want to give the impression that it's more in shadow underneath the branches of the trees there, and it creates some separation between what we're doing. And down here we've got it's a mustardy yellow, it's almost a yellow ochre. It probably wants just a touch of cadmium yellow in there. So I'll get a touch of cadmium yellow and we'll pop that up. And we'll just get a little tiny bit of that into that yellow ochre and we get some white. Mix that around. That'll give us more of a mustardy sort of yellow tone, probably a touch lighter than that. Okay, something like that. And then let's just run this down in through here. Like so. And it also runs through there. It's partly in shadow. Then we've got a number of columns and we've got the fence here which runs down through there and it runs across there. And I'll just drag it down, up and down, so it's all fence palings in there. So for the moment I'm just going to block it in and I'll leave some of that shadow to come through. So, very good. Now we'll switch our attention back to this back mountain here. It's got a slight green tinge to it, so I'll add to that a little bit of the ultramarine blue and a lot more of the white. Okay, because this is way off in the distance. A little bit more of the blue to green it up a little bit. There it goes. And let me just run that through and start to just establish this distant hill here. Like so. Okay. Then we've got greener bushes in here, so I'll add the ultramarine blue. Okay, now it's gone quite blue, so I'll get some of the cad yellow. Just green that up a little bit there. And what I'll do, I'll just use the edge of the brush and I'll just scrub it up and down. Very light touch. And darken it back a little bit. And that'll give us some interesting tree-like shapes in here. We go a little bit darker as well in parts. As we come forward, now let's get more blue, more of this cadmium yellow now. Okay, so making it just a little bit brighter green, this one. And same sort of technique here now. Okay, I've got a lot of paint on the brush there, probably too much. You want to just be careful you don't start out with too much paint on the brush. But notice I'm just scrubbing this up and down on the edges here. I want to try and keep some of the shadow tone that's already there on the edge here. So the chimney we're going to do is a dark orange, so yellow and red and a bit of blue. Okay. So a tone like that. Okay, maybe there's another little one there in that shed. Then we take a lighter tone, a lighter version of that, which just by mixing white in. Okay, and then we just run that down that side, a bit across the top there. And that gives us a bit of light there. Now, what we also want, we'll get that yellow ochre and a bit of cadmium yellow and a little bit of white. So we need to just establish some of these posts here. One there. Like so. So as we add little details like this, it all starts to come together quite nicely. Get a bit of white into there, get some blue. So we've got windows and doors in here, obviously. Just indicate them. We're not going to attempt to overstate them or anything. So. Now, we just need to get a little bit of detail working here now. Just going to get some shadows firstly. So I'm going to mix up our ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson. Get a nice shadow tone like so. I'm going to get some water onto it because I want this to flow fairly well. And let's just start establishing just some cracks and things. Stand back and having a look, and it's starting to come together. It's starting to come together. Just little bit by little bit. Now we're into a real sort of detail phase around this cottage here. You know, it's important to take your time and just work up the details. Okay, just I've already got some shadow coming through the fences here. However, I thought I'll just add in a little bit more of that sort of effect. And then right here, I'm just going to open the gate up a little. Okay, bit of shadow around the base of the house there. Getting these marks for details right, but so got one there. Now notice it's broken up. I haven't got a solid paint, and I'm okay with that. I think it adds a bit of interest to it. And if you try and get really hard solid lines, it's not always the best approach. Now this one here, I'm going to just indicate through the foliage of the trees. Put that there, like so. And from those, go to a smaller liner brush, dip that in some water. Okay, so basically this one has the lines run out of the painting that way, then they run that way. And look, I think that's pretty much all I'm going to do, you know, like I'm keeping the amount of detail on work that we do fairly loose. I mean, it's done pretty loose, but if you stand back, it looks well and it works. And in order to keep this as a painting that anybody can do, I think I'll leave it there. Let me just peel off the tape so you can see the effect. Now, if I took this down and got it framed, I wouldn't with this one. Obviously, I'd want to do a more detailed job. But if you did, it would look like a nice little landscape painting there, just with a lighter tone. But overall, I think it's a nice little representation of Sofala, the little cottage in the hill there, and a nice little country path and some trees. It's a higher key painting. It's a lighter overall painting than what we'd normally do. So I think that's good. You know, it adds a bit of variety to what we're doing here. So have a go at this one. I think you'll enjoy it. It is a good little painting, and it's pretty simple the way we've demonstrated it to you. Could make it a lot more complex if you want to. You know, you get the photo and really study it. There's a lot more details you can put in here and take a bit more time and make it more accurate. But again, I want to keep this to be as simple as possible, so I've gone fairly loose in the details, but I think the overall effect is that it works. So, hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time on Learn to Paint TV. Cheers.